Hi, this is Nick Courage. I'm the author of Stormblown and Snowstruck, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about one of my favorite hobbies, collecting books. I collect a lot of out-of-print books, some rare books, some first editions. I'll order old books from booksellers in other countries, and I'll pick up decommissioned books at library book sales. But all of the books I collect are books that I read and loved as a kid. Most of the actual books I owned as a kid were lost in a hurricane, so my mission over the past few years has been to put together the coolest possible version of my childhood bookshelf using my favorite editions of books by some of my favorite authors. I should say that I don't spend all of my time reading classic children's literature, but it is really interesting to revisit some of these childhood favorites every once in a while, just to remember what I liked about them and what inspired me to write books for kids in the first place, and to see how much children's literature has changed in the past 50 years. The business of publishing kids' books has changed so much since the 60s and 70s, and even in the past 5 years. There are just a lot more fun stories and options out there right now. So it's fun to collect these books. Sometimes it feels like a treasure hunt, but it also gives me a fresh appreciation and perspective on all the awesome books and authors that are getting published today. When I'm looking for a particular book for my collection, I'm not looking for the most pristine or expensive version of it. I'm mostly looking for the edition that has my favorite cover, because cover art can change over the years and between countries, or for signed editions, or generally just for the edition that has the most personality. This edition of The Snarkout Boys and the Avocado of Death is a great example of that. This is a decommissioned library book, and you can see it's got lots of stamps and stickers. On the first page, the first chapter, there's this sticker asking patrons to please wash their hands before reading. And then at the back, you can see where the library card would go. This is from March of 1983 from a library in Ohio. Daniel Pinkwater is one of my favorite authors as a kid and still today. And if you haven't read Snarkout Boys and the Avocado of Death, it's a really fun one. Alan Mendelsohn, Boy from Mars, is another one of my favorite books as a kid and still today, actually. And this one was a really hard one to track down, but it was worth it when you see Daniel Pinkwater's author photo in this book with a horse. It's hard to beat that, and if you can read the bio here, it's a fun one. Daniel Pinkwater was one of my favorite authors as a kid, and is still actually one of my favorite authors today, so I have a lot of my favorite books by him in my collection. Another fun book in my collection is Witch Week by Diana Wynne Jones, who wrote Howl's Moving Castle. This is a UK edition from 1982, and this is my favorite edition of Witch Week. It's in the Crestomancy series, which if you haven't read it, is sort of like an early Harry Potter before Harry Potter. And here's the US edition of Witch Week from 1993, I believe. So here's the UK edition and the US edition, and you can see how they have different covers. And this is another book by one of my favorite authors as a kid, Brian Jakes, an author whose name I just learned how to pronounce as an adult. This is a UK edition of Mossflower, which I love. For some reason, I'm really drawn to all the UK editions of my favorite books from the 70s and 80s. There's something about the cover art and the style that just really speaks to me. I love that fish skeleton boat. That's great. This is another series that you might recognize. This is C.S. Lewis's Narnia series. This isn't the first edition or first printing of the Chronicles of Narnia, but it is my favorite edition of the Chronicles of Narnia, and this came from the UK. This edition actually came from a bookseller in the Cotswolds who said he was keeping it in a barn. So here are some fun ones from that series. I love it. Yeah, Prince Caspian. For any teachers or parents watching this video who are interested in the history of children's book publishing, this is also an out-of-print book, but you can track it down online if you look for it. And this is interviews with a bunch of the best-known authors in children's publishing. So there's Lloyd Alexander, Richard Adams, Madeline L'Engle, Scott Odell, Maurice Sendak, Dr. Seuss, E.B. White, Judy Blume is also in here. A lot of these authors who were born, some of them in the 1800s, and they're talking about what they think they're doing with their books and with children's literature. So this is a really interesting read for perspective. I can't forget Jean Craighead George, one of my favorite authors and inspirations. When she first started writing children's literature, she was living in the woods in a tent for 3 years with her husband doing field research. So she really walks the walk when it comes to nature writing. This is not a first edition of My Side of the Mountain. This is my favorite edition of My Side of the Mountain. You can tell it's not a first edition because it has this Newbery seal, so it had already won the Newbery medal. But I just love this watercolor and the hawk and Sam Gribley's face. This is one of my faves. This is a Jean Craighead George that I haven't read yet, actually, but when I saw it, I had to get it because it's inscribed and signed by the author. This is For Noreen, Who Understands Crows and Crows Literature, which I love. This is Jean Craighead George, one of my favorite authors. So all of these books are really special to me, so I could talk about them all day, but just a few highlights. I have Joan Aiken, Nightbirds on Nantucket, Joan Aiken, who wrote Wolves of Willoughby Chase, which is in storage right now, but I love that book too. I have Peter Benchley, The Girl of the Sea of Cortez. Peter Benchley, of course, wrote Jaws. This is a really special book. There's When the Tripods Came, the sci-fi series by John Christopher. This is a book that I dreamt about for years, and I thought that I had dreamt it, and then I remembered that it was a series that I had read as a kid. Of course, Stuart Little, Harriet the Spy. I could talk about classic children's literature all day.